Hi guys, I'm Ashley Pollard, and this is Cocky, the podcast where women learn to take up space like we were born for it. If this is a man's world, then it's our job as women to change the rules. This is your permission slip to stop playing small, stop apologizing for your ambition, and start running your business and your life like the boss that you are. Join me every Thursday covering the week's biggest headlines in business, branding, and marketing. I may even invite a member of my team at Dial Zero Marketing Agency along for some episodes as well. And as always, follow along with us on the Cocky Substack. If you're ready to be bold, unapologetic, and maybe even a little cocky, stay tuned. Hi guys, welcome back to the Cocky Podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Pollard. I'm so excited to be back in action for you this week. Thank you all so much for the kindness around this podcast. Thank you so much to the people who have actually left a review. For those of you who don't know, leaving a review is what changes the game for podcasts. That's how you grow. That's how you get trust super easily. So if you haven't yet, please go to Apple Podcasts, leave a review. That would be amazing. We also have huge news. We now have the podcast on YouTube. We only have last week's episode if you're listening in real time. Moving forward, you will see them there. We're also putting the video on our Substack, Cocky. Last week, we had an incredible launch to our paid version of the Substack, $5 a month, and we're doing deep dive trainings all around marketing, brand building specifically. Now, this is led by my team at Dial Zero Marketing, one of the trusted agencies in the market. You will know a lot of their work that you've seen on shelves at Target, Sephora, etc. And we're giving you all of this expert insight for $5 a month. This week on Paid, which is actually the name of our paid newsletter, we are talking about cancel culture, creating a culture, and how culture can change your business. Now, why we're talking about this is because I want you to understand what makes a business truly unstoppable. I want you to understand how culture is something that touches every facet of your business and how employees can either create or destroy sales based on the culture that you've built into your business. So if you're interested in hearing those things, maybe as an employee, maybe as a founder, maybe somebody as a manager who oversees people, this could be a really great way for you to kind of learn a little bit more about company culture. Like I said, $5 a month, you'll unlock an extra maybe like 10, 12 articles monthly, which is really exciting. Now that all of the housekeeping is done, let's dive into this week's episode. This week was slow in consumer news, but that's mainly because it was loud in political news. And I don't necessarily want to dive into the political news. We get it everywhere, all day, every day. And the reason for that is because when people are trying to scare and intimidate, they flood the market with news. And so that's exactly what we're seeing right now with this administration. It's very standard of typical Trump administrations that he comes in and just causes havoc. Now, that does not mean that consumer news did not happen, especially because the big news tends to be dropped when things are crazy. For instance, I'm not necessarily reporting on celebrity culture or anything like that. However, those of you who may be following celebrity culture, when everything is havoc in the news, this is when you're going to see divorces, you're going to see bad news leaked because they're hoping that it gets scooped up by one of these news outlets and buried among all of the craziness going on. That doesn't mean that there isn't any consumer news to report, and I have a ton for you because this week is still very fascinating. If, by the way, you want to get caught up on all of the headlines that I think are really interesting this week, make sure to subscribe to the Cocky Substack because that is where I'll be sharing all of the headlines that I think are fascinating and interesting with links for you to read the article so that you can get up to date as well. First one that I really want to touch on here is e.l.f. Beauty. Now, you may know e.l.f. Beauty because they are the ones who are incredibly affordable. I'm talking $2, $3, $5, $10 makeup that you can find at most convenience stores. You can find it at Target. e.l.f. is kind of like a really great entry-level product for people who want things like brushes or primer or foundation or whatever it is. e.l.f. has kind of become a go-to. Now, is quality the best? I mean, probably not, right? However, it does the job and it's great for what it is. And it has really become a mainstay in the beauty space. Why I'm talking about e.l.f. today, though, is because their stock was down 25% recently, and people attribute that to TikTok's instability, let's say. And the reason for that is because beauty is a massive niche on TikTok. We see beauty creators like Michaela, I'm going to butcher her last name, Niguera. I don't know, the one who has like the thick Boston accent. You see people like obviously the OG ones, Jeffree Star, all of them. You have these massive beauty names on TikTok who are monetizing like crazy. They're making such great money. The ads are converting. People who sell on TikTok, which is also a major niche, there's a massive marketplace on TikTok. They're making great money from e.l.f. So we have kind of seen an uptick in sales with e.l.f. Beauty due to TikTok's rise in popularity over the past 5 years. With this instability of where is it going to go? What is TikTok's future going to look like? We are seeing again a little bit of a plummet with e.l.f. Beauty. So it's going to be interesting to see how that right sides. I think it's also quite indicative of the fact that like markets are up and down and e.l.f. will be totally fine. But it is very interesting to already see how TikTok's demise will negatively impact businesses. Of course, e.l.f. is a massive, massive business. Last year alone, they made $1 billion, literally just over $1 billion. And it was a 77% increase than the year prior. And the reason why this is so fascinating is because, yes, we see that with multi-billion million, dollar brands, but we also see that with everyday consumers. The average consumer on TikTok who is able to monetize are single moms. And I just think that's the most fascinating fact. We see all of these women finding ways to monetize their household activities. Maybe they're sharing day in the life vlogs where they're saying, come with me as I, go about my day as a mom. They may be sharing parenting tips. They may be sharing tidiness tips or organizational tactics. Maybe they're sharing how to communicate better with your spouse. There's so many different communities that have popped up on TikTok where everyday consumers can monetize. And I think that that's the reason that we're seeing such a question mark around TikTok's future is that, yes, these big brands are going to take a hit, which will impact stock for consumers who have bought in. But on top of that, they also are going to experience the everyday consumer who's missing out on real monetization. I mean, I have 20,000 followers on TikTok. I've had many videos hit 2 million views, 1.5 million views, 1 million views. My views are in the millions for all of my videos total. And my monetization is great. And that's with someone who puts in almost no effort. I can't imagine the people who really rely on this as a job because there are everyday Americans who could hardly make $3,500 a month who are now making $10, $15, $20,000 just because they're able to capture an audience and keep their attention. Now, it's a hard job to be able to do that. It's not something that is quote unquote easy. It's a lot of work. You have to know editing, you have to know how to hook people, you have to have storytelling, of course. However, this TikTok conversation is not going away. It's also been placed in the hands of JD Vance, and part of me does wonder why this shift happened away from Trump saying, I want to reinstate TikTok versus handing it to JD Vance. The only thing that I can think is that on TikTok, we have seen a massive rise in this hashtag that's like Republicans who regret their vote. It's something like that, right? Republicans regretting their vote. And you see immense amounts of farmers saying that they're losing their aid because of you said that agency that's gone. You see people saying that they're passionate about, trans people not playing in sports, but only if they can actually afford their groceries. So I also do wonder if this rhetoric around kind of like a push against the Trump administration is making him kind of second guess things, or if it's just not high on his list of priorities. It could be either, it could be both. But I also do see a little bit less censorship on TikTok than I do in other platforms. For instance, TikTok's the only place that I've noticed the worldwide protests against the Trump presidency. We see it in Berlin. We've seen it in many cities in Spain, many cities throughout Europe in general, Australia. And so it's also very interesting that I don't see that reported on mainstream media. I don't see that reported on other platforms. And I think that a lot of people on TikTok enjoy the fact that TikTok is not an American company because we don't trust these tech oligarchs anymore. So it's interesting to kind of see what the forward movement is going to be. And e.l.f. is just an indicator of how this is really going to affect people way more than they may think. There is a lot of lack of trust in male leadership. There is a lot of lack of trust in Trump with his rhetoric and the way that he kind of speaks to consumers and to the people who he's been, chosen to serve. And so I'm interested to see how this all pans out. Absolutely. because many millions of Americans, specifically single women, some of which left bad situations, were able to monetize on TikTok. And I'm very fascinated to see how we're able to support these creators moving forward and what this means for consumer brands. A little fun fact as well, if you want to join me, something that I did about 5, 10 years ago is I made a promise to myself that if a news source gets advertising money, I do not listen to them. And that is something that you can also think as well. If there are pieces of information that you're trying to find the real honest truth, you can find places like All Sides Now, Smarter News, or you could also go to some place like Grounded News for a little bit of a landscape of like who's reporting on what and what rhetoric are they using. In that, you can find the facts if you're interested in joining me on that movement. Now, let's get away from the politics of it all. Of course, I think the politics affects business, but I don't necessarily want to live in the political space. It's enough as it is. Let's go into something a little bit lighter because I love petty, okay? And we got a lot of petty recently with Kendrick Lamar's performance and also with my boy, Evan Spiegel. Now, Evan Spiegel is polarizing. I don't really have a place that I land with him outside of the fact that he's another tech bro. So, like, already going to be a bit eh. He had these emails leak years ago that were just incredibly douchey. Were they from college? Yes. So maybe I give him a pass, but they were pretty gross. They were pretty cringe. There are some things that I like about him. You know, he did turn down $3 billion from Mark Zuckerberg when Facebook tried to buy Snapchat, which I thought was very cool of him. He said, I'm not in a hurry to make this a multi-billion-dollar business. And it's like, kudos, good for you. Yes, agree. He actually keeps jabbing at Meta in particular, and I do think it's very funny. Now, it is in the past that he did a dig at the VR experiences that Meta was trying to build out with their VR goggles, which I do own. And Evan Spiegel said something like, oh, that's interesting because Snap actually focuses on real world VR experiences. For instance, with Snapchat, you know, you can go around in public and there's different VR activations that you can use within your phone, but you have to be in the real world for them to work. And so he was kind of showing like, oh, you use VR where you're stuck at home. Well, we actually get out and like meet people. I do think that Snapchat is thankfully one of the more innovative tech companies, and they really don't get their flowers, mainly because the millennials and some Gen Zs aren't necessarily on the app. Now, younger Gen Zs and Gen Alpha are definitely on Snapchat, as are boomers, which is very random and interesting. However, this space is one that innovates. And anytime Snapchat innovates, Meta takes from it. And it's interesting because anytime that Snapchat innovates or does something new or fresh, it is no time before Meta has integrated it into Facebook and Instagram. And so this week, Evan Spiegel took to LinkedIn and said, since I'm basically making Instagram, since you steal all of my ideas, I'm now naming myself the VP of product at Meta and put it on his LinkedIn, which I think is so funny. Now, Evan Spiegel, like I said, he's a tech bro, so he's still like in one of Dante's levels of Inferno or whatever it's called. However, I do like the guy and I know some people connected to him. He seems like a really good man, loves his wife, who is Miranda Kerr, who maybe you know. Miranda Kerr was married to Orlando Bloom. They have a baby together, I want to say. And Miranda Kerr also has her own line of beauty and cosmetics called Cora. Really great reputation of product, very clean. She put a lot of time and effort into it. So generally speaking, I tend to like them. They're not one of the worst tech, royalties out there. I also like the fact that Evan Spiegel isn't a troll terribly, right? Him saying VP of product might be a bit trolly, but I think it's funny. He's not, fighting on Twitter and acting like he's this rich bitch, like buying private jets and throwing millions in the air. Like he doesn't feel very ego driven. I really like the guy. And it hasn't really imploded in any way, Snapchat. They're running a really tight company and I like that. It's a legit business. It makes good money. It is profitable. Definitely has its missteps, but it's no Theranos, it's no WeWork. So I feel like Evan Spiegel is kind of like the cool guy in the tech world, and good for him for moving a little bit slower, and good for him for taking a jab at Mark Zuckerberg because that guy sucks. Moving into my next topic, here we have Poppi. I don't know if you guys know Poppi. Poppi is a prebiotic soda, which is basically supposed to be like a drink that supports your gut health, which is a massive trigger word, especially in the wellness space around making sure you have great digestion, keeping bloating reduced, just making sure everything stays working, while also kind of being like a new age soda company. Poppi has really fun branding. They have really fun flavors. It's a cool company. People have their bones to pick with them. I'm neutral. I'm not a soda drinker. I don't really enjoy sugary anything. So it's not for me, but it's definitely for a large demographic. And they've really taken over a pretty decent market share of the beverage space. What's interesting though is that I do think that they kind of flopped a new influencer opportunity that they recently unleashed. Now, here's the thing is that influencers are still a massive way to get your brand out there. And I recommend that you use them and utilize that community in ways that are going to be helpful to the brand. Now, in one way, you want to use influencers to access their community, right? Where influencer marketing goes right is when you say, you and I have shared values, and I want to bring this influencer or group of influencers into the ethos of my brand and do it well and do it correctly. One of the best influencer activations of all time, and there's a podcast episode I can find somewhere, I'll put it on Substack, about this Away campaign. I don't know if you know Away Luggage. The way that Away Luggage launched was they got all of these influencers together to take a picture with one suitcase. They only had one sample with one suitcase at the airport. They all got this picture separately, posted it on the same day. I remember where I was sitting, where I was like, why is everybody posting about this suitcase? And their pre-order went through the roof. That is the way to get influencers engaged, is to say, you're traveling, people follow you for travel. I'm going to give you a travel product and you're going to be outside of a travel space, AKA an airport, right? It was a really perfect mesh of everything while also using massive names at the time to bring it to life. People like Mariana Hewitt, Mary Lawless Lee, people that were like really big at the time. I think like Brooklyn Blonde maybe was one of them. And so really smart way to activate influencers. However, now we see Poppi use this influencer strategy in a way that I really hate to see from brands. Now, this is influencer marketing gone wrong, in my opinion, and that is exposure for exposure's sake. I think for influencer marketing to work in this day and age, you have to be sophisticated, smart, strategic, aligned, instead of simply let us be seen with big, flashy moments. Now, one way that I've seen this go well recently, because Away was years ago, would be with the recent bar campaign. Now, the company's called The Bar. They have these sweatshirts everybody has, myself included, and they have clothes. You know, they're led by a really great founder, Bridget, who is sharing her personal story about dealing with cancer, which is very sad. We sent her all of the love. But The Bar is a really cool company, very trendy. And they recently arrived at influencers' doors with this massive Valentine's Day display, handed it over to the influencer. Here you go on your way, enjoy. And it got a lot of circulation. It was great, right? Low lift for the brand, low lift for the influencer, a beautiful moment. Now, Poppi, the reason why this didn't work, and I'll tell you what it was, is because they went a little too big with very little impact. And so what they did is they delivered these vending machines fully stocked with Poppi to influencers' homes so that they had this branded Poppi influencer fridge, in essence, drink fridge, fully stocked with Poppi. Now, on one hand, there's a bit of like a let them eat cake feel with this, because it's like, what are you going to do with all that soda? Like, you're just going to have it for how long? Like, do you have to drink all of that soon? It's just it felt like very excessive. It felt frivolous. Who wants a Poppi fridge? Like, now I have to get rid of this Poppi fridge that I have in my house. I just felt like it was really strange, for lack of a better word. And the internet definitely agreed. The internet was vehemently against seeing this kind of influencer marketing because there kind of was no point but awareness. And that is where I think that this third piece of influencer marketing has to be present, which is this like shared vision, shared values, shared ideology. For instance, this could have been a really great way to build also some commercial value where maybe influencers we know and love, Remy Bader, Brianna Chicken Fry, like all of these people who I think were gifted the product. Maybe I'm wrong about who got it. But these types of influencers who are massive, millions of followers, tons of people tune into them. What if they were gifted some Poppi? Sure. But they also like brought it to communities, or maybe they used it to get together with their favorite followers or like people who were local to them. What could it look like to build community in that way, right? Somebody online suggested maybe they go bring Poppi to people without homes and that kind of thing. I think that that kind of like feels very much like Kendall Jenner presenting the Pepsi, you know, behind the line of armed soldiers. But I do think that there could have been something a little bit more values driven, even than simply sending a bright pink branded fridge full of, I mean, it's a vending machine, but like it's in essence a fridge to people's homes. It just felt very frivolous. And so for those of you who are influencer marketing or who work on influencer marketing teams, I would highly recommend that when you are doing these collaborations, really consider what story will be interpreted by the consumer? Because marketing is not a place where you get to say, well, I don't care how you take it. This is what I said, or this is what I did, or this is what we meant. You have to be perceiving, how will this be taken? How will this be received? And I think that they could have gotten around a little bit of controversy by making sure that the values were present. It doesn't have to be some massive altruistic campaign to show how selfless and caring for the needy like your brand is, but there has to be some level of values, you know? Maybe it is asking Remy Bader to do a meetup and do like a 5K walk with her trusted followers, or like there's just a million ways that they could have done it that I think would have been more interesting. On the flip side, when we're talking about brands that are evolving, I'm going to keep coming back to Unwell because they are having a massive moment right now. Unwell, if you don't know or if you don't remember, is led by Alex Cooper, who has one of the largest, most listened podcasts to date, just behind Joe Rogan and sometimes surpassing Joe Rogan, depending on the week and the platform. Alex Cooper is fantastic. And Unwell Network, if you remember from last week, is the one that's kind of like rivaling Dear Media. And Dear Media keeps sinking its heels in and saying, we're not going anywhere. In fact, they just signed Lisa Rinna and her husband Harry to do a podcast together. So we see Dear Media really investing in talent. Now, Unwell, led by Alex Cooper, is very much like a younger millennial and Gen Z, potentially Gen Alpha brand. And Alex Cooper launched Unwell Hydration, which is a drink brand. I don't think that was doing anything except for just kind of like giving her a cash injection, to be totally honest. That's a conversation for another day. But Unwell left their Spotify deal at the end of the contract. There was no animosity, and signed with SiriusXM. Now, a lot of people talk about signing with SiriusXM as this like $125 million contract, which is true. But if you read the articles about the deal, it is paid over time and contingent on certain KPIs being hit. So Alex Cooper did not get $125 million just like handed over to her in one check. Let's be totally honest. But SiriusXM is investing in her. And this week we had Unwell Music launch to the public. So Unwell Music will be available on a channel of SiriusXM with all-day music streaming curated by the Unwell team, and launching 2 Sirius shows on the same channel. One that is a call-in show of advice with 2 TikTokers that are known for talking about relationships, and the other show being about pop culture and kind of dishing the hot gossip around maybe like the Real Housewives of New York or influencer tea or, you know, creator economy, whatever it is. Just very like culture gossip in a fun way. I'm excited to see how those 2 shows go. I don't have Sirius. I think you have to download the app if you don't have it in your car, because I think some cars have it preloaded. So I do think you have to get the app. You might have to pay for it, but I'm going to tune in at least for a month just because I'm curious from a consumer standpoint what it's like. And maybe soon I'll do an article about Alex Cooper so that you can hear a little bit more about her story, because I think it's pretty fascinating. Speaking of fascinating, Mercedes-Benz announced that they were skipping all Super Bowl commercials this year and favoring social content instead. I could not be more of a fan. And the reason being that we have long time been talking in the brand and marketing world about how car commercials have no place at the fucking Super Bowl. Now, why am I getting so riled up about this? Mainly because frivolous spending drives me nuts, and bad marketing is so easy to avoid. And that's not to say that an advertisement at the Super Bowl is bad marketing, but at the end of the day, doing a car commercial at the Super Bowl is basically just flexing on your enemies. That's all it is. You are not going to sell more cars because of the Super Bowl. And every year, car commercials are on the Super Bowl. And every year, those same car companies say we didn't make money from the Super Bowl. So it's like, take a fucking hint, dude. Like, stop promoting at the Super Bowl. And the reason why I say this is because of a couple things. One, it will free up some of those advertising dollars for potentially small businesses who do get an investment and want to play in a big space, but also because it is just so stupid. It is so dumb to be working for a company, have all these low-level employees busting their ass for the business, only to see, what, $20 million spent on a 30-second commercial about the new Kia Optima. It's like so silly to me. It's a bad use of dollars. And why this is true and why studies are so loud about not having car commercials at the Super Bowl is because people are going to buy cars. The Super Bowl will not influence that. What always works at the Super Bowl are things like food and convenience. So you sell Instacart, you sell Uber Eats. Those things are always going to be ROI positive. But selling a car, like, you have the rest of the year for that, right? genius of them to put that money into social investment. Take the money, take those $20 million, because I think the average Super Bowl ad is something like 8 to 10 million, and that's the average. Okay. So that means that they can skew upwards. Let's say they're paying $20 million for a Super Bowl ad. Take the money. $20 million could be your entire social media spend. It could be multiple ad spends for targeted consumers who actually could purchase. Something else that you'll see from people who do really study the ROI and KPIs from these Super Bowl commercials is that when it is a luxury class vehicle, it does not need to be at the Super Bowl. Now, something that is a little bit more tailored to a lower spending demographic like Ford can see sometimes an ROI on Super Bowl. However, when you're somebody like Rolls Royce or, a luxury car dealer, you don't need to be at the Super Bowl because you're not making your sales there. So I also think that Mercedes is trying to position themselves as one of those luxury car dealers by pulling out of their marketing because they're saying, we sit up here, so we don't need to be in this pool anymore. Genius, less car commercials at the Super Bowl, I beg of you, and would do anything for them to hold a spot of 30 minutes during prime time where small brands get to bid and compete for ad space, maybe for free, maybe sponsored by someone else, so that small businesses do have an opportunity to advertise at the Super Bowl. I think it would be genius. And if I was a company advising on Super Bowl commercials, I would almost say that doing something like that is a little bit more ROI positive. For instance, let's go back to Poppi. If Poppi wanted to do a Super Bowl commercial, which they did, and I don't think they did it well, but I'm not talking about that today. How cool would it have been for them to take the same amount of time during that Super Bowl commercial and say small businesses powered by Poppi? And they featured 5 small businesses that you could support throughout the country, all with e-com outposts so that you could support them with online sales as well. And then each of those businesses get some kind of support from Poppi as well, so that those companies are driving sales to Poppi, driving awareness to Poppi instead of this stupid fucking vending machine. Okay. Now, the Super Bowl was quite interesting this year. Do I care about the Super Bowl? No. Do I care about football? No. Do I know any of the football terms? Absolutely not. However, I love to watch. And I know that people were very much rooting for the Chiefs to lose. And all I'm trying to say is if you have ever rooted for the Patriots, you don't get to hope the Chiefs lose because that's how we felt about you forever. Okay, that's first and foremost. Second of all, Kendrick's performance will go down in history as one of the most powerful performances of all time. And there's a lot of people who are going to do this backlash and say, I didn't get it. Why do we have to have rap? I don't know what he's saying. It's not for me. And to that I say, okay, that's how I feel about Prince. You have no idea what that guy's saying. That's what Prince sounds like, okay? And he's wearing sequins and feathers and dresses, just like you don't want men to be wearing, okay? Because it's always the same kind of demographic and person. But Kendrick Lamar's performance was everything. Not only were there really so many subtle conversations, like if you don't understand the Not Like Us song, you will not understand the performance. You will not understand how fucking great it was that Serena was out there. I'm not getting into it. If it's over your head, I can't help you. But it's typically the same people who say, I don't want rap at the Super Bowl, who also say, why does BET have to exist? Like, why do Black people get their own channel? And the reason is that, like, living in a country that is celebrated for being multicultural means that those cultures need celebrating. We are not a white country. We are a multicultural, beautiful melting pot of a country. And so by seeing that in different performances, we get to celebrate Americans. And I thought it was really great, really beautiful. Kendrick is an artiste. His use of Samuel L. Jackson was stunning. I loved it. I would love for Kendrick to do yet another Super Bowl, but he's getting his flowers. He swept at the Grammys. He had a Super Bowl. I'm so happy for him. Speaking of the Grammys and Black culture, Beyonce won Album of the Year, and she also won Best Country Album of the Year. And I don't know what to tell you if you don't think that she should have Best Country Album, because she killed it. And there are so many country artists who segue into pop and are allowed to be there. It is normal and okay and fine for a pop artist to segue into country, especially when so much of country music, if not all country music, is rooted in Black culture. And so I think that it was really, really, really fantastic, not just to see Beyonce finally get credit. She should have won Album of the Year so many times. The fact that she didn't win for Lemonade will forever blow my mind. She should have won Album of the Year last year in my eyes. So for her to win this year, I'm so happy. And if you don't agree, you have to just go listen to Cowboy Carter again because it's one of my favorite albums of all time. Speaking of my favorites of all time, my segues today are fantastic, let me just say. However, one of my favorite shows of all time, The White Lotus, is coming back to HBO or Max now. Like, we're ever going to call it that. Like, it's still Twitter, it's still HBO. I hate to bring it to you. But The White Lotus is coming back to our screens this Sunday. We're days away. I cannot wait. It is on at the same time as the SNL 50th anniversary special. So for the initial episode, I am going to watch the SNL 50th and then later watch the White Lotus premiere. But I cannot wait for the show to be back. If you have not been watching the White Lotus, you do not understand how good TV has been lately. You know, last year we had such a great year for music. Already this year, we are seeing such a great year for TV. And if you don't believe me, I have a rundown on this week's Substack, which is live today, completely free, of all the great shows that you need to be binging or watching or movies that are coming to streaming in February because I'm quite literally sat. The White Lotus is fantastic because it's always these rich people traveling somewhere to some like crazy locale. It was Hawaii, and then it was the coast of Italy, and this year it's in Thailand. Stunning fashion, like beautiful locations. It's shot masterfully, great actors, great performances. And through these stories, what you start to see is this like examination of class and differentiation of different like social structures. Every season is a little bit different in what they examine. And I'm very excited to see what this one brings. At Dial Zero Marketing, we do have the luxury of being able to work with some celebrity clients. And although this one is under an NDA, it is kind of fun to see one of our past clients on the White Lotus this year. So I'm excited to cheer her on as well. Now, one of the most fun things about doing this podcast is that I come from a very deep fashion background. I've spent the majority of my career in fashion, in the fashion industry, working for fashion brands, most that you know, Prada, Gucci, Rebecca Minkoff, Hunter Boots, Sam Edelman. Like I've been around, okay? And I love, 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 love the fashion industry. And I've been studying and watching it since I was in high school, okay? Reading Vogue, reading Vanity Fair. At the time, was it going over my head? Yes, but it's also interesting to have been watching these industries for the past 15, 20 years because you start to notice trends and see things happening. And that's really how you collect information over time, which is kind of what you may be doing here at Cocky. You start to hear things, and the more that you hear them over time, you're going to become a little bit more educated on that topic, seeing, how things play out and what things are shifting. And already we're seeing shifts. Now, at the beginning, when I started in this fashion section, what I was doing was talking about Loewe and Proenza Schouler, how Loewe's designer was potentially going to Dior, hadn't signed yet, but that Lazaro and Jack from Proenza Schouler had signed with Loewe. So Jonathan Anderson, who was at Loewe, everybody was like, well, yeah, he's going to go to Dior. It's kind of been like the murmurs. But then Gucci pulls this shit last week and fires their creative director, Sabato De Sarno. And we kind of knew this was coming. It wasn't working with Sabato, and he got let go. And so now Sabato's without a creative director, but they do have like a creative direction team who supports the creative director. They'll be okay, but we do have to find someone to kind of take that place. This is where I want to break things down for you in a simple, easy way to understand, okay? In the fashion world, I want you to think of each of these houses as they may be called: the Dior house, the Louis Vuitton house. It's basically like a brand that has multiple entities and has a very rich history. A brand new brand won't necessarily be a house. Like Jacquemus, which is maybe 10 years old, wouldn't be considered a house, but Fendi would, Prada would, big established brands. But these houses have like a vibe, an aesthetic. They have a feel to them, very similar to how directors do. For instance, if I say I'm going to see a Baz Luhrmann film, you know it's going to be wild and crazy and colorful because that's how Baz Luhrmann directs. You also could say the same for people like Darren Aronofsky, who everything is kind of like dark and twisted. You could say the same thing for people like David Fincher, where it's thrillers that really get your mind thinking. Woody Allen, where it's maybe a little sarcastic and depressing. Tim Burton, where it's like quirky and dark and maybe animated in some way. You also have people like Wes Anderson, where it's quirky and different and beautiful in ways, right? Now, you can envision these movies if you follow film. Another really great one that I love would be Christopher Nolan. He always does very like think piecey type of movies, always has like an element of time to it. Think like Dunkirk, Inception, Interstellar, which is also Christopher Nolan. He has a new movie coming out, by the way, which I'm so excited to see. My point here is that with these directors, and you can see it. They have a distinct style. That's no different than the fashion world. The fashion world, Dior is elegance and opulence and a gown for a gala and old money in a way. Balenciaga was kind of similar, and it's kind of shifted into this kind of like modern, spacey, I mean like space-esque, like genuinely like modern, almost like 2050, right? You have YSL, which is kind of edgy, was a little rock and roll for a time period, is still kind of like edgy leather. So all of these houses have a vibe, kind of like a director of a movie. Now, when you bring in a creative director, that's kind of like bringing in the lead of the movie. And you want it to match in a way. If it's too far off, you're like, what are they doing there? I'll give you an example. If Christopher Nolan, who makes these movies that make you think and keep you on the edge of your feet and are intricate and layered, and he all of a sudden said his next movie was starring Amy Schumer, you'd think like, how is that gonna work? How does it work that Amy Schumer is going to be the lead in a Christopher Nolan movie? Like, I'm not getting it. That's kind of what we notice sometimes when creative directors are just like off for something. Another one could be like Greta Gerwig is a director who does a lot of like feminist movies, lots of strong female roles. Think Barbie, right? Imagine if she said that she was bringing in like Chris Brown as the lead to one of her movies. Now, that's a bold one. Chris Brown has been like, first of all, he's a singer. Second of all, he's been, like accused, and there's proof of him like hitting Rihanna. So that's what I'm trying to say. Like, sometimes you just see things and you're like, that's not gonna work. That's kind of what happened at Gucci with Sabato de Sarnez. People were like, I don't know if this is working. I don't see it. I don't get it. Originally, people didn't know how they were going to feel about it. There was very much like, okay, cool, not what we would have thought, but go for it. So now there's this opening back up at Gucci, and people are wondering, who is it gonna be? Now, this is where they have to decide if they want to go with a heavy hitter or if they want to make a brand decision. A heavy hitter would be someone like Hedi Slimane. Hedi Slimane came in and completely revamped YSL. We've talked about that before. Then they became Saint Laurent. It really shook the world. However, it worked. It ended up working incredibly well. So in this example, it would be like Amy Schumer came into a Christopher Nolan movie, and for some reason, they work really well together. Now, I don't want Hedi Slimane to go to Gucci or to Dior personally. He would be the key pick. He's kind of the Meryl Streep of the fashion industry, where like anything he touches kind of turns to gold a little, maybe not that far. Maybe he's not Meryl, but he's big league. Now, my vote for who this person could be coming into Gucci or Dior would be Kim Jones. Some people disagree. Some people are saying that they want, Christopher Bailey, who is at Burberry. I think I'd be bored. I don't know. We'll see. I think there's like kind of like some drama in the fashion industry with this, because it's like two big houses both have spots open, Gucci and Dior. And with so many creative directors moving around, I mean, creative directors used to stay somewhere for like 10 years. People are staying places for like 4 now. So now with all these people moving around, it's like, well, who's going to go where? So I'm really excited to kind of see who lands where, because here's the thing. Fashion, in my eyes, is the cornerstone of all art in the rest of the world. You don't have to agree with that, but I'm somebody who very much believes in having a hill you will die on, and I will die on that hill. I genuinely think that to be true. I think it to be true that when fashion has big moments, it influences film. And when film and TV have these moments, it infiltrates into the zeitgeist. And when everybody is kind of doing a certain trend, it makes fashion say, well, now we want to do something different, and the cycle perpetuates. That's why you have people say like, oh my gosh, this trend came back around. Well, yeah, you've lived through the life cycle. I've lived through life cycles of trends. There's trends that are around right now that I've watched from its inception. And maybe that wasn't even its inception. It was from like an 80s version that they reworked or whatever it is. And so what's exciting about this is kind of seeing who gets planted where, because a Kim Jones Dior is not going to be the same as a Hedi Slimane Dior. And how are those fashion moments going to seep into the zeitgeist in a really interesting way? We're already seeing Chloe's new creative director making waves where boho is coming back, and people think that that's just a natural wave. Well, no, that's like 3 years in the making. Well, what's going to happen when Alessandro Michele does expand what he's doing currently with Valentino. These fashion designers going to these new houses does make waves in ways that we may not understand as everyday consumers. You might think, well, I'm just a girl in Missouri. It affects you in some way because it may be a collaboration that Target does. It might be a packaging decision of your favorite popcorn. Like, we think that these bigger decisions don't come down and infiltrate into our world, but they do. And I think that that's what's so fun, is seeing the big, crazy moments and how they distill down into those everyday moments. And so excited to see what happens there. Definitely a big shakeup in the fashion industry, and it's going to affect a lot of things. And I do kind of think that Demna's probably on the way out of Balenciaga, which would mean we have a third seat open. And then it's just like madness, because that would basically mean that 3 of your favorite directors said that they have massive, massive budgets to launch movies this year, and like what they want those movies to be like. And it's going to be fun for the public to be like, well, I wish they would have cast so-and-so as the lead. But in this world, it's more like, these are the 3 houses that have seats potentially open. Demna's not out. So like 2 seats open. Who are they going to put in there, and how's that going to affect the future? It's very exciting to watch. This is why I love the fashion industry so much. I think it's just so much fun to be a part of. With fashion, I also think one last thing I wanted to share is that Jacquemus has struck a deal with L'Oreal to build out beauty as a department of their business. Now, if you don't know Jacquemus, massive fan of this man, okay? Not only is he such a dear lover of his mother, which I just find so endearing, but he is spoken very highly by the people who work for him, both very closely and in his retail stores. He has a great reputation of being a good leader, on top of the fact that he has a great reputation of being a creative genius. He's the first one to do some of these like AI marketing activations of like super sized product, which we now see everywhere. Rhode Beauty recently did a launch with Tate McRae where the lipstick was taller than her. That is a callback to Jacquemus, who had his bags AI generated of driving around the city of London 4 stories tall. Like, you can find it. I'll link it in the Substack so you could take a look. But Jacquemus is just a creative genius, and he makes these bags that go super viral. He started with one bag for many years. As I've always said, you have to do, expanded it into different iterations. Now he has retail everywhere, and he kills every time. I love Jacquemus. That is a brand worth spending your money on. Now, what does this deal mean for L'Oreal? First of all, it means a massive cash injection, because here's the thing. When Jacquemus expands into beauty, the nice thing about signing with L'Oreal is that they don't have to do the product testing. They don't have to find the lab. They don't have to do any of the clinical trials. They don't have to do any of these things because L'Oreal's done it. Now, what you may not know is that when you sign with a big conglomerate in this way, they share factories. So like, his lipstick is going to be made by the same people as the people that make other L'Oreal products. And a lot of people don't get that. And sometimes that upsets people. Sure, maybe they change the formulation, but like probably not that much, which is nice, because if you go to any of these conglomerates and you find the cheapest brand, you're getting the same product as the expensive brand, typically. Now, you also see this with other conglomerates that aren't as big as L'Oreal. I don't know why I'm whispering, like Kim Kardashian is going to hear me. But take Skims, for example. Skims, Good American, Frame Denim. What do all 3 of these have in common is Jens Grady and Emma Grady. Now, if you don't know these 2, they are a power couple. Jens Grady either started Frame Denim or co-founded Frame Denim. It took off, massive hit. And they proposed to Kris Jenner, the manager, that they wanted to do clothing for Khloe Kardashian. And that is how they started Good American. Frame Denim and Good American came together. Very interesting that Frame started as Frame Denim and Good American started as denim. It's almost like they might have the same factories. They might have the same production team. They might have the same product designers, right? Then we see Skims come along and do things like cozy t-shirts, cozy nightwear, all of those different things. And then so does Good American. And Frame starts talking about how they are making soft t-shirts. And I mean, not that they always have, but my point here is like, yeah, because you are getting it from the same place. That way, if you have to buy fabric, you don't have to buy fabric for 3 separate brands. You buy fabric for the company and use it among those 3 brands. It's a way to keep costs way down. And it's also a way to kind of like pool resources. It's no different than what I do with my businesses. For instance, there are businesses that I invest in with Cocky Ventures, and those businesses get my team's effort at Dial Zero Marketing. On the flip side, my other business, The Doers, which is in entrepreneurship community and membership, they get access at times to Dial Zero Marketing by way of us creating templates for them and designing for them and writing copy for them. So I'm also pooling my resources among these different businesses because it's smart, right? It's not like taking advantage of anyone. That's like how business is done. So Jacquemus has a trusted partner with L'Oreal, knows it's going to be profitable, knows it's going to be successful. The question is, where are they going to position it? Because this will kind of determine the future of Jacquemus bags and apparel as well. If it were me, I would do an exclusive collaboration with Saks, Neiman's, and Bergdorf's. And the reason is that Saks just bought Neiman's and Bergdorf's, which honestly we need to talk about sometime because it's crazy that they did that. But that way you're staying positioned within a luxury market and your bags are sold there. So you can buy the world of. You can buy the Jacquemus dress paired with the Jacquemus heels, paired with the Jacquemus bag. Go get your Jacquemus lipstick downstairs versus putting it into a Sephora. I think it would cheapen the brand. I definitely don't want to see him at an Ulta. I think he could maybe do like a blue Mercury, but I am very curious to see how they position the brand because it is going to affect apparel. And that is where I'm curious what their deal is structured like. But if I were him, I would make sure that I had some decision-making power in order to make sure that my brand was getting put in the right places for the continuity of the brand and for the future of the brand with where you started. A lot of trend is about positioning, and people want to wear bags and shoes and clothes that position themselves among their peers. And so you don't want the Jacquemus beauty to be positioned differently than the Jacquemus clothing, or it cheapens the Jacquemus clothing. So I'm very curious to see how that goes and how that rolls out. I'll be keeping you posted, that's for sure. As always, thank you guys for tuning in. Kind of a chill week, guys. Now, I don't necessarily need crazy weeks in consumer news. However, still plenty to talk about. We have even more on the Cocky Substack. You can go take a look there. We also have a section this week about what to stream and like what TV shows and what movies are great right now if you're looking for something to just like get out of your brain for a minute. And then this week, we are talking about how to make a brand that can't be canceled, how to build a strong company culture and employee culture, and how to use your marketing as an integration of your culture, because I think that's super fascinating and I love talking about those things. Like I said, $5 a month, we do 2 to 3 articles a week just for that paid division. So feel free to join us and subscribe. And thank you guys for tuning in. Please review the podcast on Apple, I beg you. Please leave us a rating on Spotify if you'd like. And above all, subscribe so that you get this first available every single time it comes live on Thursday. Thank you for tuning in. I'll see you next time. Hi guys, I'm Ashley Pollard, and this is Cocky, the podcast where women learn to take up space like we were born for it. If this is a man's world, then it's our job as women to change the rules. This is your permission slip to stop playing small, stop apologizing for your ambition, and start running your business and your life like the boss that you are. Join me every Thursday covering the week's biggest headlines in business, branding, and marketing. I may even invite a member of my team at Dial Zero Marketing Agency along for some episodes as well. And as always, follow along with us on the Cocky Substack. If you're ready to be bold, unapologetic, and maybe even a little cocky, stay tuned.